Hey everyone, in this video we are going to learn how to create a built-in fixture in Adobe Dimension. So first we want to open Adobe Dimension and we're going to create a new document. Now that our document has opened, we want to go over here to the Properties panel and change our scene units into inches. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to create a flooring using the plane in the starter assets. I will click once on the plane. Now that the plane is in our scene, we need to change the dimensions of the plane. This is going to be a 12 foot by 12 foot plane. So in the Properties panel under Object, I will type in 144 inches, or you can type in 12 FT for the width and also for the length. Now I need to use my dolly tool to zoom out so I can see my plane in the scene. Next, I'm going to rotate around the scene so that I'm looking at the plane straight on. I will use the orbit tool. I'm going to rotate counterclockwise, and now I'm looking at the plane straight on. So before going further, you want to make sure that your plane is placed at the position of 0, 0, 0. It's perfectly centered on the scene. Next, we will place a material. You can always kind of place temporary materials and then go back and really refine your materials. There are a lot of materials on Adobe Stock, so you may want to take a lot of time really choosing your materials carefully. Now we're going to label this plane floor by double clicking onto it in the scene panel, and I will call it floor and press enter. Next, we are going to build a back wall. We will once again navigate to our starter assets. I will click on the cube and it is placed in the center of my scene. The dimensions of this cube will be 12 feet wide and it will be 8 feet tall. So that will be 144 inches wide, and for the height it will be 96 inches, and for the depth we will make this 3 inches. All right, so now we need to orbit so we can see the placement of the wall, and we're going to want to push it back using the arrows and the move tool, and we're going to snap it to the back of the wall. All right, I'm going to use my pan tool to center this in the scene, and then I can give this a material. Okay, so now that I have my floor and my wall, I can begin building the side walls and the center walls. So to build the wall, we are going to once again use a cube. So we'll go back to our starter assets and click the cube, and it's placed in our scene. Now this cube is going to be 3 inches wide, so that will be 3. The height will be the height of the wall, which is 96 inches. And the depth will be 2 feet, which is 24. So when I rotate, it looks like this. So now I just need to place this wall. It's going to be placed inside the flooring on the edge where it meets up with the back wall and the edge of the flooring. So with the move tool, I'll move it over here and I'll rotate around, and then I will move it back. And this version of Adobe Dimension shows how everything can kind of like snap into place, which is really useful. So here I have this left side wall. So I am going to call this left wall. And before I forget, I need to call my back wall cube back wall. So it's good to keep everything organized. I'm going to go ahead and give this a material. Okay, so now that I have my left wall, I'm going to create a wall that is left of the center. So we're going to have 3 columns, 3 sections for this planogram. So first I will duplicate this wall. Make sure you're in the move tool and you have it selected before you duplicate. Now I'm going to move the wall. I'm going to use the transform tab to position this. I want it to stay hitting the back of this wall. But I also need it to be at a very specific position so that there is 44 inches in between each wall. I've gone ahead and done the math for you. So you need to place this at an x of negative 23.50 and press enter, and that is the correct distance. So I will call this wall left center wall, or center left. All right, I'm going to duplicate that one more time, and I'll call this center right wall. And this position is going to be a positive 23.5 at the X, so I'll just delete this negative sign. And now it's moved over there. And I will duplicate one more time. This will be the right wall. And the location will be pushed to the very right, just like we did with the left wall. It should be positive 70.5. These side walls and interior walls are meeting the back wall. Notice they're not being pushed into the back wall. They're sitting right on top of the back wall, and they're placed inside the area of the flooring. Okay, so now we have our 3 sections. Now we can start creating the shelving that will be placed into these sections. So once again, let me zoom out just a little bit. I'm going to create a shelf using the cube. So we'll go back to our starter assets, and I will click the cube, and it's placed into my scene. As I mentioned, the space in between each of these walls is 44 inches. So I know our shelf needs to be 44 inches wide. I know the depth of this wall is 24 inches deep, so it should be no more than 24 inches. And I will have the height of the shelf be 2 inches. So in our object tab, we'll type in 44 inches for the width. For the height, we'll type in 2, and the depth will be 24 inches. Now I can go ahead and place this on the wall. So let me move it, and I can push it back so that it hits the wall there, and I will place it right perfectly in between the shelving. It should fit perfect. And if it does not, it means something is off. We need to place this shelf at the correct height. So we will have 3 shelves. There will be 2 feet of distance in between each shelf. So for the Y, which is the height, I am going to type in 24 inches, which is 2 feet. So the first shelf will be 2 feet from the ground. Now, before I get too deep into this, I'm going to call this shelf, and I will give it a material. All right, so I have my shelf placed. I'm going to look at it from all these angles just to make sure that it's in there correctly. It has a name, so now I can start duplicating my shelf. I will select the shelf in the scene panel and hit the duplicate button. Once again, make sure you're in your arrow for it to duplicate, so let me click on that again. All right, so it took me a couple times for it to duplicate. So if you click it and it doesn't work, just go back to your move tool, just select it again and hit duplicate again. You may need to give it a second to think, but sometimes it's just not registering the click for whatever reason. All right, so now that I have this duplicated, I can go to my transform tab, and I know that I need to add 2 more feet to the Y axis, so it's going to go up 2 more feet. So I will type in 48 inches. And now that should be placed correctly since I did not change any other dimension. All right, so now we need to duplicate the shelf one more time, and we need to change it once again 24 inches up, so that will be 72 inches, which is placed at 6 feet. And so now we have 3 shelves that are built into this first column. I am going to select all these shelves here in the scene panel, holding down Shift, and I will click this folder button to create a group. And I will call this group left shelving. So I want to have shelving in this right column as well. So what I'm going to do is I am going to duplicate this entire group, and I'll call it right shelving. And now I'm going to move it over. This is going to go over the x-axis. So right here we have -47. I'm going to remove this negative, and it'll be a +47. So it's going to go 47 inches the other way, since this is a symmetric display, and it looks like everything is placed just perfectly. Okay, so now we are going to build our center shelf, and we're going to also have a lateral rod. So let me go ahead and first place the rod. So I'm going to rotate my scene so I can see this left inside a wall of the center left wall. And I'm going to go to my cylinder, which is in my basic assets. Now I'm not going to click and release so that it goes on the floor. I'm actually going to drag it so that I see the cyan highlight on this wall. Now I need to change the dimensions of my rod. So you could do this in the object, but I actually want us to do it in the transform panel under size. I'm going to click this link so that it unlinks. So the X will be 2 inches, and so will the Z. This creates the diameter of our rod. And the Y will be 44 inches, which is the length of the rod. And so it's fitting perfectly in between those two walls. Now I need to adjust the placement. I want to have it at -22, which is good. I placed it there on that wall, and so the X position is correct. However, I want the Y to be at 66 inches so that it will sit below the shelf that will be above it. This rod should be placed centered. Once you have your rod placed, go ahead and give it a material. All right, so the final thing we're going to do is we are going to have a shelf in this top center column. So we could duplicate one of the shelves we've already created, but they're all grouped together, so I'm just going to create it one more time. So we will go to our cube. We will change the size of the cube to be 44 inches wide. It will be 2 inches tall. It'll be 24 inches deep. And we will give it a wood material. I can use my eyedropper tool to source the wood material that is already on my other shelf. So I'll have this shelf selected. With my eyedropper tool, I will click on these other shelves, and now this material is applied to my new shelf. I will go ahead and type in the dimensions for this. I know that the Y position will be 72 inches for my shelf. And I know that it will be pushed back to fit perfectly in between. I can see it snapping to the wall and snapping in between. The X position should be 0. It should be perfectly centered on the scene. And I can see that it is in perfect alignment with these other shelves. So now I have created my built-in display. We will use this display as a starting point for our midterm project where we will create our own boutique. So be sure to save this. Make sure everything is nice and squared. You want to make sure that your shelves are fitting perfectly in between these walls. Same for the rod. If you follow all of the dimensions and placement that I've given you, everything should be perfectly squared. So you want to make sure that you don't rotate anything. Make sure everything has a material, and do make sure that we label everything in our scene panel. I kind of forgot to label my rod over here, and I forgot to label my top center shelf. Okay, so be sure to save and upload to your OneDrive and submit to Canvas for grading.